We're joined today by Rob Howard from Accurise, who is an Xledger partner, to learn a little bit more about why he's been working with Xledger. But first, Rob, can you explain to me what Accurise is?
Sure. Accurise, we replace what would otherwise be an internal finance team for our clients. So we're an outsourced service, but we partner really closely with them, and we typically work with larger businesses as opposed to small businesses.
Cool. And is it like general purpose? Do you focus on a sector? How does that work?
Currently, we're almost entirely focused on hospitality. We do some gyms as well as that. We're also looking now to move into professional services. And we've recently become resellers of Xledger as well. So we can sell the product to people who are going to use it internally, as well as deliver our services on top.
Cool. So not implementers as such at this point, and more kind of directing people towards it. Is that right?
We are implementers, and we are now bringing on our first implementation clients. But predominantly up until now, we have taken on clients who are multi-site chains of bars and restaurants in the UK. We've taken all the information out of their system, we've mapped it, we've put it into Xledger, and then we do all the processing inside Xledger itself.
Brilliant. And is there limitations to what you would replace from an internal finance team?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the client and the size of their internal resources. So typically for a smaller business, if you've got 4 or 5 sites, you might not even have any internal finance resource at all. So we're providing everything up to what a finance director would do, including financial modeling, cash flow. We might be writing reports for the board or offering advice, reporting directly into the owner or the CEO. And then as our clients grow, they will add some internal resource, usually a part-time FD when they start that can become a full-time role. And then once businesses get to 15, 20 sites, that's usually when they start looking for a financial controller, because the hardest part of that finance piece to outsource is the policing. And as much as we try and as closely as we would partner with the head office team, you can still run into problems where there's only so many times we can ask a site if they've done something and they start ignoring us because we're a supplier, whereas somebody who's directly employed by the company can get that through a bit easier. But it's generally a gradual process. If you look at Wingstop, our largest client, who are 57 sites turning over, 150 million a year, just acquired by Sixth Street for 450 million pounds in December. Their total internal finance resource is a CFO, a finance manager who runs the department, a financial controller, and a finance business partner. That's it. We do everything else.
It's crazy how small that team can be by effectively using a partner to deliver it. And I think this aligns really well with the conversation we had in the last episode with Pete Hucker about how UK accounting firms are now considering doing more outsourcing. Tech has enabled this, and it seems to be growing upwards in scale of business. It used to just be those micro entities. So it'd be really interesting to hear about how kind of Accurise came about and why Xledger.
So I was previously to this, I was the managing director of an outsourced hospitality finance business, quite similar to Accurise, that was using some legacy software called Xchecker, which is effectively a database sitting on a server in the corner of the room, with fields of junior staff doing everything in Excel, which was clearly, it wasn't fit for 2010, never mind the 2020s. So I wanted to change all that, and I had a look at all of the offerings out there. There's loads of the sort of smaller offerings, which are fine for small businesses, but my drive has always been to work with larger businesses. So that took us to the mid-market, and I looked at kind of all your standard players, your SAP, NetSuite, Sage Intacct, everything else like that. And I found a mate of mine who was at Smith & Williamson and said, have I missed anything? Is that just the sum total of the market in the UK? And he said, I've heard about this software, Xledger. It's quite new to the UK, but it's big in the Nordics. You should speak to them. So I phoned them up, and like I say, there was, I think, probably 8 people employed by them in the UK at the time. And I phoned them up and said, hi, I'm the managing director of an outsourced finance team looking to change our whole software. I've been told you guys are good. We've got about 50 people employed here. We've got all these clients. Can I speak to somebody? And the chap I was speaking to on the phone said his name was Tim, and he said, he seemed quite keen, and he said, yeah, I'll come up and see you at your offices. So he came to see me the next week, and I went down, and they said, Tim's here. And I went, sat in the room, and it turned out it was my mate Tim from the local pub, who I knew worked in some sort of tech, but had no idea he was the sales director for Xledger in the UK. I said, "Did you know it was me?" He said, "Yeah, I did know it was you, but I was wondering if you knew it was me or
Oh,
not."
at least you know. I really hope that from there you went to the pub to continue the conversation because that's where you used to be in.
I think we actually had our final discussions on the contract that they offered us in the pub over a pint, actually,
It's the best
which
way
is
to
where
do
all
it.
good business is done.
And that was what's like 5 years ago now. Is that right?
Yeah, we were kind of doing this through 2018 to early 2019, but sometimes you realize you are the odd one out in the management team, including the owners in that, and you can try and push back against that and convince everyone that all of these changes are a good idea, or you can do what I do and what I did and throw my toys out the pram and say, well, if you're not going to do what I want, I'm just going to leave then. So that's what I did, and I quit in halfway through 2019, and phoned up Xledger and said, bad news, you're not getting this massive deal you were really hoping to get. Good news, how would you like me to become your first partner, just me and somebody else that I know? And they said, well, go on then. It's not as good as the first option, but we'll take it.
Yeah, well, it's somewhere to start, I guess. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a bald man thing, but I have done a similar thing recently, Rob. So I can feel your pain of trying to get that and going on your own.
Yeah.
But look, you went through, and obviously you decided on Xledger, but what was it about the system? What were the specifics back then that made you think this is the system that will power the business as it grows?
So there's two parts to that, I guess. One part is, are you going to move away from the small systems with like the app ecosphere into a more kind of complete system that does everything? And it was clear I always wanted to have a system that did everything rather than be bolting on bits. And then how true it is, I don't know, but I'm always concerned that something's going to break and both of these companies are going to be saying it's the other company's fault. I like to have everything with one company. So whichever bit's broken, it's definitely their fault. I just prefer that in general. So given that we were going to move away from that, and because we wanted to work with larger businesses, actually some of the features between all of those systems are reasonably common because that's where the development pressure is. Things like the reporting, all of those systems I've talked about will offer you a decent reporting solution. One might be better for your particular case, but they've all got a rounded reporting offering. They will all do accounts payable quite well. They will all have bank integrations because you can't not have one. But very specifically for us, there was a few things. One was that if I looked at where Xledger's revenue came from worldwide, about 80% of it came from partners delivering services like I wanted to do. So I knew that all of the development pressure for the last 20 years on Xledger had been, how can you empower a partner to work with a client, rather than how can we make this product better for an internal finance team that you can then possibly find a way to work with your clients? Because particularly in hospitality, where you've got all of these restaurants spread out everywhere, but we never want to have our team sitting in our clients' offices because they're then tied to that space. I need to be able to offer somebody 20% of the time for this client, 30% here, and be able to move people around. Yeah. So they have to be sitting with me. So that ability to work remotely and really tailor and configure the access that everybody has. An FD for one of our clients needs to be able to see everything, but I absolutely do not want the FD to be able to post anything, because there needs to be a really clear line. If something's wrong, it's our fault, right? I can't be going, and there are other concerns as well. We have a reputation to uphold, and all of a sudden, we all saw what happened to Patisserie Valerie, where,
yes.
So it needs to be our responsibility to do the posting, and Xledger gives us the ability to do that. It has a hierarchical structure, which I didn't see from anywhere else, which means that we have a very top level, which is Accurise domain, and then underneath that we might have Accurise hospitality, and then underneath that we might have Pharma J holding and Wingstop holding and Yoke holding, and then underneath that you've got the legal entities. And whenever I make configuration changes at a level, it flows down automatically to everything else underneath it. So if I set a base chart of accounts, which I want across all of my clients, or if I want to change the way something in the system works, I do it once, and then everything I set up underneath that will inherit all of those changes. So that saves me a load of time on setup. It also means then that the information consolidates upwards live and in real time. So everyone says, oh yeah, we'll consolidate, but really it's a process. You finish your accounts for each company and then you run a process and it gives you your consolidated accounts. Whereas in Xledger, particularly in hospitality, you will have lots of SPVs holding the leases for each of the individual sites. Often, sometimes we have clients where each individual site they have, and they might have 10 of them, is sitting in its own legal entity doing the trade for that individual company. So in a less full-featured system, you're constantly hopping from one to another and you can't see everything that's going on. Whereas in Xledger, you can be at that holding level and you're literally seeing it live and not just your reporting. If I send a multi-entity client a payment run, they're going to see all of the invoices that we've suggested be paid across all of their different entities. And if they want to filter it by company, they can, but they could also filter by supplier. So they can see how much that we're intending to pay the fruit and veg supplier across all 10 entities on this payment run, because their relationship will be one-to-one, even if it's all these individual companies. And we can do things like, in that situation, well, we might owe them 500 quid over here on this entity, but the supplier owes 800 quid to us on a different entity where we're expecting the money back. So that allows us to then say, well, we're not going to pay you the 500 quid because you still owe us 800 quid over here. So you get, there's lots of little things, as well as this idea of some consolidated reporting. The specifics of how it works really helps us do our jobs.
Yeah, and I think what also the benefit of that structure means that, I know you've got that focus on hospitality, but if you move into professional services, you could have that sector that is a level. Yeah. So if you want to change something in the sector, it only affects that sector and not every other entity. So yeah, I think that,
and even the levels underneath that. Professional services is a big sector, so you might have professional services where you make changes for professional services as a whole. But then if we do recruitment consultants, recruitment agents, then those can have their own holding level underneath that, which will just affect the ones under that.
Yeah, and as outsourcing becomes a more prominent part of a lot of accounts' revenue stream, I think this is something that's become more and more painful for them, as they're, as you say, working across multiple different logins as such, for clients. So look, Rob, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. I think we've learned a lot. And if you're ever going to check out software, make sure that it's not your mate that's the one that's going to be selling it to you.
Yeah, there's something to that. Thanks very much. It's been fun.